Eidsnat, good evening. Thanking everyone for being here. For any of the folks who I may have not met, my name is Tim Ballew, Chairman of the Lummi Nation, and very glad that everyone took some time out of their lives this evening to come be part of the community process and both to speak about and also ask questions about the lifeblood of our community, which is the Nooksack River watershed. You know, at times in our beautiful area, it seems that we have plenty of water for all of our needs, and sometimes in some of our communities we have a road or two that floods and we think that we may have too much water. But the reality is that during parts of the year, such as these summer months, we have a system and a management and land use process that sometimes leaves us without enough. And it's our goal as leaderships as well as community members to make sure that all of our needs are met, that when we turn on the faucet for our tap, that we have water to drink, when we have work that needs to be done and food that needs to be provided for our families, and a way of life that needs to be fulfilled. We need the water to be there for us to support our community. The lack of water and in-stream flows, along with other habitat issues and water quality that are directly linked to land use as well as consumptive use within our watershed, over the past few years, past few decades, has declined due to development, and in the case of speaking for the community that I represent, that has a strong link to fisheries, a strong cultural, economic, and social link to the ability to harvest fish, and not just for the sake of harvesting fish, but to carry on a way of life where traditions, practices, and teachings are passed on from father to son, mother to daughter, and so on and so on. That ability to have water for our people and for our community is vital. And so just being fresh off of a crab opening this last week, you know, it's times that when on the water, you know, I think of those times, and it's only a few moments, you know, in our life that really shapes who we are as people, shapes who we are as communities, and I really value those times that I'm able to share with my children. I think about the times that I shared times with my grandfather, with my dad, with my uncles, and understanding who it is we are as a people, and how we give back to the community. And without that ability and opportunity to do that, without the opportunity of good habitat, good water quality, good in-stream flow for fishing, for fish, inability to sustain a way of life is very challenging. And from the tribe's perspective, you know, we very much appreciate, we respect, and we understand the concerns of consumptive use, but there's a definite need for a better understanding of the in-stream flows for fish habitat and fish quality. And, you know, for nearly 2 decades, local municipalities, local governments, along with the tribes, Lummi and Nooksack, have participated in good faith with the state and trying to find resolutions to this problem, and we're committed to doing so, and we'll continue to do so until we find a solution that meets all of our needs. Within the Nooksack watershed, we do have a wide range of ways of life, from the farming and agriculture, from folks with raising cattle, as well as the fishermen, as well as other folks who need the water for consumptive use within our cities. We have a wide range of issues and problems, and I'm very glad that we have a dedicated community, which I think that all of you represent, as well as the leadership and some of the other folks who are here to speak to some of the issues. I think between all of us, we'd be able to find those solutions that will help our communities grow together and maintain what I think is the best region in the world of the Salish Sea and Cascadia. So I'm thanking all of the panelists who are here to speak of the issue, thanking Executive Louws for moderating not just this tonight's forum, but all four, as I was told.
Not quite, no. I was at 2 of them.
Oh, was that 2? But either way, we're thanking everyone for their commitment to improving the community, and we look forward to a good evening. Good to see you.
Thanks so much, Chairman Ballew. Really appreciate the Lummi Nation hosting this event tonight, and we appreciate the opportunity to dialogue with the nation and with all of the partners in Whatcom County on this critical resource that we all need to sustain our lives. I'd like to start tonight with just a couple housekeeping things. First, if you could turn your cell phones off so that we wouldn't be interrupted by the noises that may come from them if you get a call or a text. Also, restrooms are probably 50, 60 yards out this way to around the corner and to the left. If you need to take a break in the next couple hours, please feel free to step out for that. Later this evening, when we get into the question and answer period, we're going to ask the audience members here if you could line up over here to ask your questions, because that's where the microphones are at, and we want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to hear the question. For our panelists tonight, we're going to have opening remarks, and they're going to be up to about 10 minutes. We have a very fine timekeeper here who's going to be giving you the blue notebook at 9 minutes, and if you could wrap up at that time, we'd appreciate it. And then during the question and answers, we are hoping that the audience members would stick to asking a question, and if you could make that in under a minute, we'd appreciate that, and then we'll give the panelists up to 3 minutes to respond to the questions. Well, as Chairman Ballew noted, we all have a common goal to adequately provide for the sustainability of our environment. We want the sustainability of our economic prosperity, and we want to maintain the quality of life that we have in Whatcom County. And the issues surrounding water, whether that be quantity and or quality, is important to each of us on an individual basis, but it's also very important for Whatcom County government. Earlier this year, the Whatcom County Council passed a resolution, which we're commonly referring to as the Water Action Plan, and at the council committee meeting here a few days ago, my office provided a response to that. And I've put 2 documents out on the tables if any of you are interested to pick those up at the end. I also saw there's a lot of other great information, and I encourage you to take a look at all of that also. But basically providing an overview of the water resources in Whatcom County and what we believe that we can improve on in the 2015-2016 budget years in the different areas and the different disciplines that we're involved with. Water quality, which is primarily the bacterial pollution in our shellfish growing areas. We're hoping that in the next year, all of these within our current budgets, that we're going to be able to augment our on-site sewage program, that we'll be able to provide more outreach and some enforcement on our conservation program on ag lands, commonly known as CPAL. On the water quantity issues, that we're going to be able to do a lot more groundwater modeling in the next couple of years, and that's going to be an important important component for all of us as we start to determine who and what and where all of this finite resource is going to be allocated to. But good scientific understanding of what we have is important, so that when we sit down and are talking about this, that we've talked concepts a lot of years, but we're going to get down to the nuts and bolts of particularly what we need to do, and we're hoping to spend some more resources on that. Water quality also in the Lake Whatcom area, we're going to do considerably more of capital improvements, particularly in stormwater management in the Lake Whatcom watershed system over the next couple of years. And then with habitat issues, the CPAL program gets back into that in terms of farming practices and management, and we're hoping to engage with the Conservation District to have them be the point agency on a lot of this, because they have such a good reputation and interaction with our farming community out in Whatcom County. Our NPDES, which is the National Pollution Discharge, it's even too big of an acronym for me to always remember, but we're going to have a lot of stormwater monitoring and a lot of maintenance and operation on our culverts, ditches throughout the Drayton Harbor area, and of course the Lake Whatcom area. And it's going to be more and more important for us also through the Portage Bay drainage to augment that, and that coming down from some federal and state rules with that. So I believe that Whatcom County is engaged. I'm sure many of you know that Whatcom County doesn't have any direct water rights, but we have a vested interest in water. Because it is something that our water associations, our municipalities, and our individuals who have private wells and that's who we work for each and every day. And we want to stay involved and provide good, solid information for people as we move forward with a water action plan over the next coming months and years. Well, tonight I'm excited that we have a great panel before us, and I do at this time want to say that Mayor Linville sends her apologies, but she is not feeling well, and I can attest to that. I had breakfast with her this morning at 7:30, and she had a definite head cold and some problems that she was challenged with this morning, and so anyway, she sends her regrets and would like to be here, because we did talk about this this morning, but it's just not working out. So I'm going to give a bit more of an introduction to our panelists here as we call them forward, but we have Ed Blok. He's the Ag District Coalition member, a dairy farmer in the community. We have Dave Olson, the owner of Water System Services, and he's providing a lot of support to the water associations throughout our area. We have G.I. James from the Lummi Nation. G.I., thank you for being here. We have Skip Richards representing the non-government water systems. And our closing speaker tonight is going to be Tom Loranger, manager of Department of Ecology Water Resources Program. So, and did I miss anybody up here? Excuse me, I was looking at Mr. Brown out there. I'm so used to having Mr. Brown at the council meetings correct me on things is that I probably shouldn't have been drawing my eyes to him like that. But anyway, appreciate each and every one of you here, and I think that we're here to hear what they have to say tonight. To preface this, and I apologize, is to thank, I needed to thank the Grange also for putting these forums on. We appreciate the work that you've done over the last months in hosting these, or in providing the agendas. The focus of the forums and the focus tonight is in a broad sense, is what are the major issues with water supplies and uses in Whatcom County? And what would a comprehensive and reasonable solution look like to you through your lenses in terms of the constituent base or the occupation that you're in? So we're looking forward to hearing from them for a few minutes, and then we'll get into some question and answers, and hopefully the questions will be broad enough that they'll be get more than one person to answer them. So, without any further ado, I'm going to ask Mr. Ed Blok to come forward. Ed is a dairy farmer who's lived in Whatcom County for 42 years. He farms with his two brothers and a nephew on their dairy south of Linden. Ed has been involved in various aspects of agriculture over the years and is currently serving as the chairman of the Agricultural Advisory Committee to the Whatcom County Council. He also serves on the Whatcom County Dairy Federation Board and as co-chairman of the Ag District Coalition. He truly enjoys his career of farming and hopes to continue being involved in the industry for many years to come. Help me welcome Ed Blok.
Well, this isn't exactly my favorite place to be in front of you all, but I'll try to bring a perspective from the farmer's perspective, I guess, and from the perspective of working on the WIDs that I've been quite involved in. I'd just like to thank you for having me here. You know, we live in an awful nice place here in this county, and I don't know if you know it or not, but this is a great place for cows too. This county has been one of the highest production areas for cows, and that relates an awful lot to the climate that we have here and such. So we really enjoy being here. We were given some questions, so I'll just kind of go down that list a bit and give my comments on them. The first one is on the pros and cons of watershed management. I think that's a great way of going. The local participation, the local implementation of those things is a good way to go. I mean, if we can get local involvement in that, that's a great way of going. I think the 10-mile project is going on, and I think that's a great example of the neighborhood getting involved. And from the concept of the WIDs, the watershed improvement districts, I think that fits in pretty well. I think that's something that we can work on with the WIDs to work at improving habitat, improving water quality, doing these different things. The WIDs do bring the ability to finance these things, and also has some authority with an elected board and such to deal with these issues. And also I think the natural resource marketplace is something that I'm hoping can get developed more. This would be a way in which we could deal with different things and hopefully avoid some regulation and that kind of thing, and have a marketplace to trade on some of these issues to make it work for different people. As far as the leasing of water and having a water delivery system, I'm not real familiar with, and I don't know a lot about. I think one of the things that I think would be key to me would be the cost of it, and if that would work, for the users. you know, there's different ways of doing that, but I think the number one thing for me would be the cost, and if that's feasible. I think in some ways it could be a great thing. The pros and the cons of WIDS. I obviously think there's a lot of pros because I've been involved in organizing this with our board for about a good year or so now, and there's a lot of good things about this. I know some people have felt that, you know, agriculture is going to get all organized and be wanting to throw our weight around, and I don't see it that way at all. For one thing, you got to understand farmers, and we're not exactly the easiest group to put together. So we're all pretty independent, and that's part of the reason we're farmers. We like, you know, doing what we do. But if we can get this accomplished, I think this will be a big step toward having an entity that represents agriculture in a way that can be approached by others that are working on these types of issues in the water. It will give us the ability to send a representative to represent ag out of an elected board. It'll be the most legitimate thing, you know, representation that we've had to this point probably. And I think, you know, I think there are just lots of different avenues we can head down and look at if we get the WIDS established. The WIDS can apply for grant money and stuff that we as individuals cannot. And I think that will be a helpful thing if we're looking for solutions and trying to figure out, you know, if there's mitigation involved, whatever it might be, this will be a very helpful thing. The WIDS will be self-controlled. I mean, the only folks that can be on the boards are those that are members of the WIDS, which are basically landowners in the WIDS over a certain amount of acres. But we will also be self-funded. We will be taxing ourselves to give ourselves the ability to work on these issues. So, in a sense, the farmers are stepping up to the plate here to put some money together and try to work on these different issues. And, you know, we see some of the main issues are definitely going to be water quantity, and I think that'll be a lot of the discussion here, and water quality, which, you know, for dairy farmers has been a big issue. And then for drainage, which also relates to water quality. If we don't have good drainage, it really affects our abilities to manage our land right. And also flood management is a big issue for a lot of us. So, you know, I think, you know, if I can speak for the board, I would say, you know, our attitude there is very much that we're part of this community, and we want to be involved and working for the solutions that we think we need, and hopefully, you know, we can come out on the other side of this, and we will do well with that. The question as far as recognizing tribal treaty rights, I don't know a lot on that. I do know that, you know, the state has recognized them for a long time. I'm not totally sure if I understand totally clearly what the rights are. And I think that's one thing that, from what I understand, is I believe the tribes are asking to get that quantified, what their actual rights are. So I don't think, for a farmer like me, I don't know that I have ignored them. but I don't know that we've totally understood what it is either. And that's just being honest with you. But as far as getting to solutions on this, I think, for all parties involved, I think we got to show respect for each other and be willing to work with each other. So, if we can work together and we can figure out what our needs are and we can figure out good solutions to that, I think, we can come to a win-win situation here. And I think that's where farmers are. I think we want to, be a part of this community and be involved and be part of the solution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ed. Appreciate what you're doing out in the community with your farm. I know that your family is heavily involved in it, and it's a pretty impressive operation that they have. Also appreciate your commitment to be involved with the county on these county boards and being involved in the Dairy Federation. It speaks highly of your character and your integrity to want to be an active part of the solutions that we need to come up with for a lot of these issues that we have. As Ed alluded to, the speakers were provided 4 specific questions that they were asked to incorporate somewhat into their remarks. I didn't want to read them all over at this particular time. I was going to ask kind of at the end that if there's anything that you guys would like to augment related directly to them, we would do it somewhat in that fashion. But so I'm not going to, at this point, read them out. I will at the end, and we'll go from there. So, I'm learning too. I think this is one of the first times that I've been a moderator at anything. I've done a lot of different things in my life, but moderating an esteemed group like we have up here with this great audience is something a bit new for me. So bear with me also as we work through the evening. The second speaker tonight is Dave Olson. Dave's the owner and president of Water System Services, which provides technical, managerial, and administrative services to over 50 government and non-government drinking water systems in Whatcom County. His firm serves and represents about 6,000 connections, serving a population of about 14,000 people and about 5,000 dairy cows. So he's very involved in what's happening in Whatcom County as it relates to water. Dave's got a bachelor's degree in business management with specialized education in the drinking water industry. He's a certified drinking water operator and licensed as a water distribution manager, a water treatment plant operator, a cross-control specialist. I think I even know a little bit about what that means. But anyway, obviously you've been very active in the industry. Since 1992, Dave first served as a board member on his local water association, and he recognized that small water systems in Whatcom County and around the state are in turmoil and are ill-equipped to face the growing and often confusing rules and regulations for water quality and quantity. Dave works exclusively with water systems in Whatcom County to help provide our community with a safe and reliable and sustainable drinking water supply. Help me welcome Dave Olson to the podium. Did I do all right? Yeah,
We're going to have a hand for our moderator at the end because he's getting pretty good at this. So thank you for that introduction. It's an honor to be here with the community and with the other distinguished speakers here, and it's really a privilege to be able to share a bit about some of the people that we work with on a day-to-day basis. I've been asked to speak from the perspective of rural potable water systems, and my comments will be focused on non-government systems, which are generally smaller and volunteer-based compared to their government counterparts, with staff that are dedicated to managing and operating their water systems. As a disclaimer, I do not own a water system, and I do not sit in any board of commissioners or board of directors for any of these systems. I am simply sharing today my perspective from a day-to-day activity that I do with these systems, and over the past 20 years that I've been able to work in the water industry, primarily in Whatcom County. Rural potable water systems are generally located outside city limits. There are a few exceptions, but generally they're going to be outside city limits. But it is not uncommon for them to serve commercial small businesses such as corner stores, hobby farms, and in some cases dairy farms as their customers. In Whatcom County, there are about 400 potable water systems serving approximately 59,000 connections and a population of about 160,000 people in round numbers. And as you might imagine, the majorities of these are rural, non-government potable water systems. And that's the group that I've been asked to speak about here this evening. As we consider the big question which was put before us tonight, that is, issues and solutions, what's next? And so before I get into some of those questions, I just want to take this opportunity to share a little bit about the culture of the customers that we work with on a day-to-day basis, and it'll help give you a perspective as we look at these questions towards the end and during the panel time. The truth about most of our rural water systems is that they've been around for 20, 30, 40, even 50 years, and most of them were put together by communities that came together and farmers that came together to develop safe, reliable water for their local needs. And in many cases, these were put together by volunteer labor where they would buy the materials and work together. And over the years, certainly there's been some attrition of that, but that's the foundation of this community in the rural Whatcom County. Water systems back then, they were new, they were simple to operate, there was not much maintenance, and as long as the water flowed from the tap, there was nothing to worry about. Much the same as when you buy your new car. It's the best time, the first day until you find out you just lost 20% of the appreciated value. So water systems now that are reaching 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, you can imagine that what they were experiencing and benefiting, like a new car or a new house, we aren't able to have those benefits. And so certainly today, those volunteers that put that together, most of them have gone. Many of the volunteers today are overwhelmed with the responsibilities and complexities of these systems. The rural systems are facing aging infrastructure, rising construction costs, and raw materials and labor, rising construction costs of raw materials, labor, and financing cost. Today's volunteers are well-meaning people that know very little about running or operating rural water systems. They don't have support of their community and are lucky to get others to volunteer on the board, let alone get them to show up for meetings. They are busy people trying to raise a family, work full-time, with little time for volunteer work on behalf of their neighbors who often don't understand or care how the water gets from their source to their taps, as long as it gets there. But if the water doesn't show up, the neighborhood and community expectations and their opinions change quickly. So rural water systems often have inadequate, non-self-sustaining water rates, but the volunteers often cannot bring themselves to raise rates for their neighbors, let alone themselves. If there is a meeting, the majority often determine to keep rates as low as possible. And often I find myself sitting across the kitchen table from a couple or a couple of individuals that don't know where to turn. They don't know how to deal with many of these business aspects, the complex regulations and rules, and the water infrastructure that they've inherited from their legacy generation that built these systems. And so with that picture and that frame of mind there, I just wanted to briefly touch on some of the questions that we have, just in a few remarks here, and then I'll close. The mandate of rural potable water systems, a good community system, is to provide safe, reliable, sustainable water supply to our community. And part of this is being a good steward of our water resources in our community. For us, this means being efficient with our water, avoiding waste. It also means educating our customers about the issues related to water and resource management. And so one of the questions talked about the pros and cons of watershed management approach for improving water quality. And quite frankly, we have to recognize that most of these systems that have wells All they know as a community is that someplace in their system, water comes out of the ground and it shows up at their tap every morning when they get up to take a shower. Their concept of their responsibility in a watershed is really nothing more. They don't communicate or understand any more connection than what they might read in the paper. And so it's very difficult to bridge that communication gap. Unfortunately, in most cases, rural systems and their customers are disconnected from the big issues that often face our county. There is certainly more of an issue when a rural system is faced with a contamination, whether direct or indirect contamination from things in their area, or if they're contaminated with nitrate or their wells go dry. All of a sudden, they're very active, and by that time, it's often too late. And so I believe that rural water systems can begin to engage and play a role on a basin level, and I'll speak more to that in a minute, but it is difficult for them to see beyond their backyard and connect on the broad and complex issues and daunting countywide issues that we'll sit and talk about today or that we'll read about in the paper. There is no connection between the tap and their water and these broad, complex issues. And so the second question asks us about solutions related, potentially related to, for those who have insufficient water rights possibly, and those that may have sufficient legal water rights. Is there a way that they can work together with those? Or is there a way that those have wet water, as we would put it, water in the ground someplace that can be piped through a pipeline over to those that may have a dry well, or they have bad water quality, such as our nitrate problems in North Whatcom County? And for one reason or another, definitely some of our rural water systems may not, I'm carefully saying that, have sufficient water rights to meet their existing demand. We're not talking about growth here at all. We're just talking about meeting their existing demand. Other systems have nitrate-contaminated sources, such as in North Whatcom County. The potential that we're talking about here for leasing water rights or pumping water to address quantity or quality issues around the county is a very welcome concept. And we'll talk in the question periods more about some of the things that we're actually able to do on a small scale. The potential of leasing these is very important, and I believe there is a great willingness among all of our rural water systems to address both of their quality issues and their quantity issues. They're not running from them, but going to a solution that they are not aware of or can't research is very difficult for them. So however, once again, we have these small rural water systems that don't have the capacity to even begin looking at solutions on a grand scale, let alone in their own basin. As far as the last couple of questions, just to wrap up, the Ag Coalition and the water improvement districts, I think the key for us there is we're not connected to them in a sense, but what's really important to us as we watch this develop is the ability to work within a basin. These are very grand, large problems that we're talking about, and for these small groups, it's difficult for them to tie in and link into some of these solutions. But within various basins, there's a lot more that we can engage and get involved with. And so I think the approach of a basin-wide or basin approaches to some of these solutions is really important. And so I guess I just wanted to encourage us as we kind of wrap up here. In the last couple of years, I have learned and heard and watched more about water issues than I think in the previous 10 years combined. Certainly I'm more engaged. And I think a lot of that was the symposium that we had a year or so ago. That really jump-started the conversation. I think we were encouraged and challenged at the symposium to have collaborative effort and look outside the boxes to some of the things we just talked about. And I think one of the things that most pressed upon me these issues is there was a passionate challenge from Deanna Bobb, who was the attorney from the Lummi Indian Business Council at that particular session. And she challenged us to look carefully and honestly at the big picture with respect for the many and diverse needs of our communities, because in the end, we must strive to live and work together in harmony. And so I think that's what we're accomplishing with all of these forums, and I just really personally want to thank those that are organizing and moderating these to really bring these issues to the forefront and shine a light on them. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave, for those words, and I think that brings home the complexity, and I think I do understand the what sometimes I guess you could call as even apathy in terms of the involvement in having what is considered, for most of us, is a major piece of infrastructure is the pipelines and water lines and the water that we receive at our houses. But appreciate your work in the community with the associations, and I can sense from the way you are presenting the topic tonight that you're a professional in the way you do it, and we thank you for that. So, our next speaker tonight is G.I. James. And it's interesting, I get all these different bios, and we're probably fortunate that the mayor's not here because her staff sent me a 4-page bio. And I think that'd take me 10 minutes to get through. I always have to give Mayor Linville a bad time anytime that even on tape. But anyway, looking forward to hearing from G.I. James tonight. He has been the tribal liaison for King County for 15 years. He's served several terms on the Lummi Tribal Council. He's held, I think, 13 to 14 different positions that I have here listed out. But he's been very, very involved in the Pacific Salmon Commission. Fraser Valley, different commissions on that. He served as a Lummi Nation council member, their treasurer, the vice chairman, the general manager, policy director, and self-governance director, along many more. And what I find very interesting on his bio is that he wanted us to know that he's been married 48 years. He's got 2 sons and 6 grandchildren, and I think that that's really important. So, G.I. James.
Well, good evening, everybody. I wasn't expecting this many. My cohort and cousin up there was out fishing for the last few days, so he wasn't able to fully prepare. And I'm also not going to address these questions directly because I didn't have enough direct knowledge of these and Andy and Randy and a few others tried to help me through some of these. But without the direct knowledge, it's a little difficult to put things together in that fashion. So I'm going to go from some experiences and information that I've gained over the last several decades working with tribal issues and non-tribal issues and fish issues and political issues. But to start, I am a Lummi tribal member, but I'm also half Dutch. My mother immigrated from Holland in 1914 and came all the way across the country with my aunt, or her aunt, my great aunt, and her father and mother came all the way across from Holland to here to work with dairy cows. So I'm familiar with this half of my heritage and respect it a lot. But I also was born here, but had to move away when I was about 4 years old. My father was arrested so many times for fishing out here in the river and in Bellingham Bay and other places south and north that they were going to put him in prison the next time. So he had to move us away. And so I was raised in Seattle, but always kept our contacts here and moved back to be the first of my family to move back home. But to get to the water issue, which has been just a difficult issue for people to deal with, but because it's so personal. It's stuff that you use on a daily basis. It's stuff that you use for your livelihood. But one of the things over the several decades that I've been working with water is nobody ever does the math. And by that I mean, If you add up all of the water rights, the paper water rights that exist out there today, and you add that up and you look at the amount of water that's left in the system, there isn't enough water to meet the existing amount of water, paper water rights. So it's not real difficult as far as the math goes, but we refuse to deal with it in a logical manner of how do you face that problem? And that's just the legal water rights. That doesn't deal with the illegal uses of water that are going on in this county that we seem to just say, well, people got to exist, so we're going to let them continue on. It's hard for us when our fish can't make it upstream. They can't make it downstream. Either not enough water or the water that's there is polluting it and killing off the fish. So I ask from all of us that we sit down realistically and deal with the math that's there and figure out from there, you know, somebody said, well, this stuff is so hard. Where do you begin? Well, what I learned a long time ago, somebody told me, is begin where you want to end. You got to do that work, setting up where is it that we want to be. Then you can measure whether you're actually getting there or not. One of my old bosses at DNR in Olympia said, our job is to get the Phoenix. What the hell are you talking about? He says, you got to know where you're going, or you just wander around. You never are able to measure whether you're achieving progress towards your goal. And we never set that goal, whether that be the non-tribal side of the equation or whether it be the tribal side of the equation. We've got work to do to make it clear what it is that we need and measured up against what we actually have. And then we can really start to deal with whether any of these processes that we've got set up, whether it be Bertrand or 10 Mile or Terrell or Birch Bay or any of the other processes, the water resource inventory, which isn't even on the list. I don't know who put the list together, but that started back in 1998. And I ask of all of these, and I apologize, you know, if I'm pointing fingers, but I'm basically asking the question, what have we achieved? How do you prevent yourself from having a great trip with a great bunch of people to an unknown destination and just wandering around in the wilderness as Moses did, waiting for somebody to tell you finally arrived? You know, that's something that we collectively got to do so we can hold each other accountable for achieving, not just doing stuff, but actually getting there. And I know that's hard. It isn't easy to come up with those answers. But it's a hell of a lot better than saying, well, like we did in U.S.-Canada, back in 1985, set a goal of rebuilding Chinook in 3 cycles, of which one of those cycles was deemed to have already occurred. So we were going to rebuild Chinook in 10 years. So we're damn near 30 years into a 10-year rebuilding cycle for Chinook. Because there's no accountability, there's no performance measures that you have to achieve, not just a list of stuff that we did that cost a lot of money, created a lot of pain, but didn't actually achieve any of the goals that we really had in mind, but didn't actually say. So I'd say, you know, we need to do that. One of the things, you know, that that we did is you keep making things bigger. Down in King County, and the three counties, King, Snohomish, and Pierce, started Tri-County, prevent the listing of Chinook. Well, we had great meetings and a lot of people and no production. So, okay, that's not working, so let's start shared strategy. Let's bring in Kitsap County and Thurston County, and let's go after not only Chinook, but Chum and Coho. Let's widen because there's more problems than just Chinook. Well, geez, same thing. A lot of people, no action again, no outcomes. So that fails. Nobody will say it fails, but so now, let's do Puget Sound Partnership. Let's clean up all of Puget Sound. We couldn't do Chinook. We couldn't do Chinook and Coho and Chum, so let's do it all. So it's, you know, first you fail, you make it bigger. You know, you make the chore bigger. That's what we did, and, you know, I include myself in that. I'm not pointing my fingers out at all these people. I was involved in some of this stuff, and I've hopefully learned a lot in that process. But you know, one of the things, you know, one of the questions is, you know, about the tribal participation, and I'm not going to speak for the tribe. I don't speak for the tribe. I retired from King County government the end of last year, and so I don't speak for them. But I have a lot of experience there. And I know that our tribe, probably paramount amongst most, are government-to-government proponents. You know, we're, as tribal members, involved in a representative government. The non-tribal society is also involved in representative government. And we really we can't possibly negotiate and work with this many people on the amount of issues that are out there. So at some point, and you know, to our, our last speaker, I apologize for names, but it's difficult for small entities to do all of the stuff, but that's what representative government is about. They've got Department of Ecology to work on these issues. We have a small staff that works on water, and they can't possibly be involved in all of the issues that folks want us to be involved in and want the tribes there so that they know what the tribes are thinking. And it's just, again, a math problem. You just can't get there. We can't hire that many staff and be in that many places, and as well as it's against the grain of what we believe in sovereignty as it's government to government. And due to the federal government's failure to be able to address these issues, we're put in a position where we need to deal with the state. They've had to step in and deal with a lot of these issues that we now would prefer to deal with the federal government on, and that they do that. But anyway, I think I've spread enough information on you guys, and I'll be open for questions later. Aishka.
Jay, thanks for your comments on it, and I really appreciate you acknowledging your half Dutch heritage. Of course, that's my background, so kind of close to home, growing up in Linden. But do appreciate your active involvement in tribal affairs over the years, and we're looking through the state and the federals to continue to work on bringing resolution to some of these issues, and hopefully from my comments earlier that we're going to take a look at the amount of water that we're using from the public systems, and hopefully over the next couple years working with the different groups that we have is putting together a practical list of what the out-of-stream users are using in terms of the ag and in industry and so on and so forth. So I think that we're hopefully getting closer. It's going to take a lot of time yet and a lot of effort, but appreciate your comments tonight. Our next speaker is Skip Richards. Skip has been involved in water resources beginning in 1994 as a contract representative for Whatcom County's water associations. In that capacity, he worked with government water systems and the State Department of Health to advocate for reform in the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act, and served on the State Water Supply Advisory Committee. Skip has also been very involved in the WRIA process, serving as the representative for the non-government water systems caucus of the planning unit since its inception in 1999. During the development of the WRIA 1, 2005 watershed management plan, Skip instigated the development of its general scope of work, led the adaptive management section of the plan, and participated in many of the technical teams and subcommittees. Looking forward to hearing what Skip has to say. Let's welcome him to the podium at this time.
Thanks, Jack. Thanks to the Rome Grange, the other forum sponsors, and to all of you for taking some time out of this rare, beautiful day. Used to be, not just a few years ago, a water forum, you wouldn't get one row filled. So at least people are beginning to catch on to how important this all is. I'm glad Jack didn't read all of my biography. I was starting to fall asleep there, just the part that he did, so I apologize for that. I'm going to start with the first part of question 1 regarding the treaty rights. That problem has resulted from a series of cultural, social, legal, and political failures on the non-tribal community side. Just out of our own self-interest, we should have been paying more attention to the implications of all this. Started in Olympia. By the time the state water code was passed, the Winters case was already 9 years old. So the state knew or should have known the implications of that case, yet the code provides a passing reference to federal rights and doesn't mention treaty rights at all. State agencies share some of the responsibility. When the Surface Water Code was passed in 1917, and again when the Groundwater Code was passed in 1945, what was going on in the world? People were reading the daily newspaper very avidly, but they weren't paying much attention to the fine print of legal notices of things came out of Olympia. So what steps did the state take, given those extraordinary circumstances, to inform rural landowners, especially farmers, or anybody else of the import of those laws? Now, the Bolt decision in '74 was a big wake-up call, especially for non-tribal fishers, but its implications for the rest of the community went largely unappreciated. It wasn't until 1998's Watershed Planning Act that local stakeholders began, along with the tribes, to address the problems head-on. By then, the ESA listings were already upon us. The problems had deepened and accelerated. So now there are no easy answers. We're left with the tough answers. So let's look at the 3 that we've looked at that are on your questions, starting with question 1, watershed management. Well, drainage-based management, I've been advocating that since 1992. I think it's necessary to achieve our goals, but it has many challenges. The county's critical areas ordinance has an exemption for areas that have watershed plans. Though passed in 2005, it has yet to be used. We've waited so long to get it rolling that most property owners have they've already made their deal with the devil. They got their farm plan, they got their permit, so what's their incentive to participate? The longer we wait, the bigger that problem's going to get. So the sooner we get started, it's only under Executive Louws administration that this provision's been noticed, and I believe they're going to start taking action on it, and that's good. Leasing water, there's one big negative to that. What happens when the lease expires? The lessor, the water purveyor, can set higher rates and impose other conditions on the contract renewal. The lessee, the water user, has no recourse. The legislature could make exemptions to contract law for future water contracts, but you know the trial lawyers and the other lobby groups are going to have their say before that ever happens. So good luck with that. It won't be easy. It's going to be worse if the lessee is outside the purveyor's jurisdiction. Rural water users don't vote in Bellingham's elections. At a previous one of these forums, Bellingham Councilmember Lilliquist stated it quite plainly. If Bellingham helps farmers with water, he said, there will be conditions imposed relating to land use policies. Do rural residents want Bellingham to influence or determine their land use policy? Everyone needs to think long and hard before embracing that concept or signing any of those contracts. Watershed Improvement District's been advocating that since 1992. There's a lot of good positives to it, but there are issues with it too. We've all heard that saying that the size of the fight in the dog is more important than the size of the dog in the fight. That's really a tough one. I'm wondering if the size of the fight in the dog is diminishing, and if so, you can't blame them. You look at all the different obstacles they face every day. I don't see how they do it. The water code's unfair to farmers. Cities don't have to follow use it or lose it. The farmers do. They get hit regulations by all sides, and oftentimes the requirements of the regulations get in the way of them solving the problems that the regulation was designed to solve. And it just goes on and on. But there are some potential issues. What happens to the little guy, the guy that doesn't get a vote? These are just questions I think that need to be answered. That's one of them. The other one is the formation of a joint board of control. Well, the folks that are sponsoring that now, like Ed, everyone knows them. Their reputations, they're deservedly well respected. Their integrity is unquestionable. But they won't be able to hold those positions forever. What happens to their vision when they're gone? How are we going to ensure that it continues the way they intended it? So back to the second part of the fourth question, which asks, what can the tribes do and what can the non-tribal community do? Here's some things we can all do. First, recognize the common threats that we all face. Here's two of them. Complexity is growing out of control. The purpose of a complex system is to bring order out of chaos. But when systems get too big and complex, they increase disorder. This problem is especially acute with regulatory systems. We're drowning in rules that are confusing, contradictory, and often counterproductive. Time is running out on all of us. If we don't find solutions, put them in place soon, eventually the law of averages is going to mate with the law of unintended consequences, and none of us will like the offspring of that union. Second, we need to adopt some guidelines for moving forward. Here are a few suggestions. Shared sacrifice requires shared decision-making. If those you disagree with the most aren't sitting at the decision-making table, you're wasting your time. It means you got to sort through a lot more no's before you get to yes, but that yes is actually going to work. And I like what G.I. James said about this focus on results. We need to explicitly adopt and strictly adhere to an evidence-based, results-oriented decision-making regime. Anything else fails. We must set priorities for action and stick to them. You can't address one problem alone. They're all connected. Piecemeal efforts increase complexity. They don't solve the problems. We need to stick to agreements we've made. all of them. Finally, we have to recognize that we stand poised on the razor's edge. On one side, there lies the deep chasm of hopeless despair. On the other, the temptations of cynicism and venality always beckon. Balancing on the razor's edge isn't comfortable, easy, or fun, but it's the only way to get from where we are now to where we all should want to go. Let's get on with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Skip, for those words. And Skip did a wonderful job of outlining the 4 questions that were presented to the panelists. So I don't think that I'm going to rehash that in a lot of detail at this particular time. I'd like each of you to think about questions that you would like to ask the panelists. It's about 10 after 8 right now. We're going to have Mr. Loranger speak at about 20 to 9, and he's going to give us our closing comments. So we have about 30 minutes here to go through some questions and answers. And while you're thinking about that, we do have some elected officials in the room, and I know that I'm going to mess up, so you guys start pointing, but we have Mayor Jensen from the city of Ferndale over here. We have Barbara Brenner, Whatcom County Councilwoman, up in this area over here. We have Jeff McClure, PUD 1 Commissioner, right here. And who else am I missing in terms of elected? Somebody's pointing somewhere. Mike Murphy, right over here, another PUD Commissioner. Mike, thank you for being here. Who else am I missing? And right over here, that's right, Dennis. Good to have you here tonight also. We have some candidates here. I'm not going to call you out by name, but if you're running for a political office or for re-election, let's stand at this particular time. Everybody in here stand if you're running going to be on either the primary or the general. And after the meeting, if those of you who are in attendance have any questions of these outstanding candidates, I encourage you to say hi to them. I went through that about 2.5 years ago. I think next year, I know right now that next year I'm gonna put my name forward again and give it a try. But boy, I tell you what, to be able to put your name forward for a public office and go through a campaign season is it's a lot of work. And I appreciate you folks giving these fine men and women a round of applause for their willingness to serve. So if you would, line up over here for questions. Mr. Brown. No, oh, you're moderating. You're always the first person at the county council meeting for your 3 minutes. I thought you were going to be, Greg, you're disappointing me here. Why don't you come on down, folks? And again, would appreciate direct questions. We all have our opinions, and we all have statements to make. And I know sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to do that. But let's keep it concise, and then we'll ask the panel members to respond to it. And if you'd state your name, and then if you'd ask the question, if you have a specific panelist you would like to ask it to. We'll get to that panelist first, and then we'll add whether any of the other panelists have responses also.
My name is Mike Newman. I'm from Skagit County, and we have the largest watershed on the continental United States, or third largest watershed in the continental United States on the west coast. And we have a water shortage where wells are outlawed because wells are have a negative impact on in-stream flow. I'm also a taxpayer and property owner in Okanagan County, where because of in-stream flow, wells are mandated because wells have a positive impact on in-stream flow. And I would like somebody to explain to me the science behind what is happening here between Skagit County and Okanagan County.
I'm not the person for that answer. I know that. I'm looking scared trying to figure that one out. We got some attorneys. Any of the panelists wish to work on that one?
Skip, you probably have.
Hi, my name is Tom Loranger with the Department of Ecology, and I know we've talked before about this a little bit in the Skagit. In Skagit County, there's a groundwater model, and the groundwater model estimates the amount of depletion of the river from wells. And so it's all models are imperfect, but it has a pretty good generalization of impacts. Are generally, wells that are more down gradient have smaller impacts. 20-30% of water that the well is extracting would otherwise be draining to surface waters. Wells that are up gradient tend to have more impacts on surface waters. I know the Okanagan rule has got some specifics around depth to the bedrock and limitations on putting wells in bedrock, and so I'd need to look at the specific facts around that.
Any of the panelists care to add to the answer? Thank you for the question.
Can I follow up with one, or?
Very quickly.
Okay. Snohomish County, the city of Everett provides water. They get it from the Pilchuck River. They don't have a water shortage. The Pilchuck River is smaller than 3 of the tributaries to the Skagit. Can you explain to me why they don't have a watershed, or they don't have a problem, whereas the Skagit does, when they're actually providing water to more people than what we are in the Skagit?
Skip?
We're here, right? I like to think of it as it's like you got $1 million in the bank. I mean, that's a lot of money. But there's a check circulating on that account that never expires, and you've signed it, and there's no amount filled in. Okay, so it doesn't, all of this, the details of this stuff is very difficult, very troubling to deal with. But the big driver of it is how do we get more fish? It's not how big the system is, but what's the productivity based on that? It's theoretical capacity, and that's really hard to do because you want to focus on results for that, but sometimes you have a 20-year cycle, so you can't go out there and do something and expect an answer tomorrow and see if it works or not. So we have a well-developed system called adaptive management for trial and error, how to figure things out. It is rocket science. They use how many times did the rockets blow up from the 40s? Took 30 years to put a man on the moon, but they did it, right? And they learned every time you do it, you try, you learn something, you try something better. But we don't know, there's too many unknowns and links in the chain to make that a simple answer. And as long as those systems are not as productive as they once were, the fact that there's a water shortage is going to be one of those reasons that's used to say, well, we got to stop using more water. So the whole knot needs to be untangled. And the longer we keep pulling on the ends of it, the tighter that knot's going to get. And it makes it very hard for people. That Swinomish case was tough on ecology as well as on the citizens that it affected. Just the way it is.
Thank you. Next question, please.
Interesting microphone. My name is Nicholas Kunkel, candidate for the 42nd Legislative District, Position 1. I'm a former tribal fisheries biologist for the Lummi Nation. A lot of faces around here I recognize. Good to see you guys. My question is for G.I. James. My question is that basically it seems that you'd like to pare down some of the resource management goals to smaller, more manageable ones. You mentioned salmon and salmonids, and that you seem concerned about cohort and run size, reasonably so. What do you think about the possibility of a private nonprofit aquaculture model similar to Alaska's, basically taking some of the freshwater habitat requirements out of the loop, so to speak, to solve some of those problems, as well as increase marine survival for salmonids? Do you think that a program similar to Alaska's private nonprofit model of fisheries would work in Washington?
I don't know a heck of a lot about that system up there. I can tell you, for-profit ones, we fought in court, and you know, at some point we've got to deal with how do we provide enough resource without taking the pressure off of fixing the habitat that caused them to go bad in the first place. So there's a balance there where it's at. Not sure. We've got to deal with hatcheries, but we've got the same problem as the state of Washington, where hatcheries are regulated, harvest is regulated, but water has very little as far as fish-oriented outcomes tied to it on a direct basis. So we have to deal with it. We've got to figure out some kind of balance, because so much habitat is already gone and it isn't slowing down. I seen something a month or so ago where Whatcom County is, you know, one of the fastest growing counties in the nation. So we've got to figure out, what do you do with all of these people? Because it isn't just the consumptive side that is being impacted. It's also the impervious surface and the other things that come along with humans. You know, whether it be wastewater or cars or just other kinds of pollution and use, that we've got to figure out some kind of balance. But right now, I don't know if that's the solution or a solution. You know, just need to take a better look, and our fisheries folks may have, and they may say, hell no. That's where I get to work. I don't know. So I you know, I can't speak for them at this point, but, you know, just a lot of things need to be considered in the process before you leap off and say, yeah, gee, that's the answer.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk to you more about it.
Okay.
Thank you so much for the question.
I'm not sure if this panel can really answer my question, so hopefully it'll be answered by the party that is giving his closing remarks from DOE. But in a time when when people have little trust in government, I want the Department of Ecology, the representative here tonight, to tell me that we can trust the state to protect the citizens' water. I ask this because, as a farmer already testified, he knows very little about tribal water rights, and it's this lack of information that results in people being taken advantage of. I served as a pro se in the phase 1 of the Lummi groundwater suit, and I know what tribal water rights are based on. They're based on the extent of federally held trust land and the purpose of the reservation as established by the terms of the treaty. Now, Judge Zille ruled that agriculture was the purpose of the reservation. It was not fisheries.
And your question is, Ms. Dawson?
My question is, will Department of Ecology support us? Because when the findings of Judge Zille found there was no trust land, and the purpose was agriculture, then the state basically went into mediation. And I felt that our rights to the water were being violated.
Okay. Thank you for that. And that, Mr. Loranger, Tom, if you could spend a moment on that at this particular time.
So what I would say, the basis of water security in Washington State and in all the western states is this prior appropriation water law doctrine. And the reason we have that is so when people started, you know, they homesteaded, they struck a mining claim, they started a farm, they made an investment. They wanted to be sure that that investment was protected. And so the water code is all about first in time, first and right. And so in terms of security, if you're part of the prior appropriation system and you have a claim you have a water right. That's your best security. It's there to protect you. There's also the question of underlying unquantified tribal water rights, and that's a question for the federal government to reserve when they are petitioned by tribes with that question.
Good to see you, Marlene. We've been at this a long time, and Marlene has her point of view of what the judge had to say in that specific case versus what the water right for fish are in a different set of issues and a different set of rights for the tribes. And that's, I think, why we're all here trying to work these things out. It's easy enough to go hire the attorneys and go battle this out in court, but the purpose of these, I thought, was to try to work things out, and that's at least what I understand that the tribe is trying to do, is do that. Let's not go to court. Let's figure this thing out and not spend that time that the resource doesn't have. People will survive. I will survive. My culture may suffer. Your culture may suffer. But you will survive. We will survive. It's whether we're able to do it in a way that does the most for each of us in doing it. And because the fish don't have anybody speaking for them. The tribes are the only ones that are outspoken about the fish. And we only have half. And that's a diminishing half. So it's important that we try not to put words in anybody else's mouth, that we don't try to misconstrue. I want to respect your position. I have a little saying that I use. It's called understanding, respect, and consideration. And it's understanding where the other person is coming from. Doesn't mean you have to agree with them. Respect where that person is coming from, even though you may disagree and think that they're off in la-la land somewhere, and that you consider their point of view when you're making a decision that will impact the resources that are important to them. And I think that if we do that, we can get a long ways in getting things done versus this is my position, this is your position, and never the twain shall meet. Well, at some point, somebody's going to make a decision that impacts all of us. It can be us working it out, or it can be a judge like Zilli, or Judge Bolt, or the many judges that came in and made decisions that some of us liked and some of us didn't. So I really hope that we're here and we're starting that kind of conversation that has outcomes that we all understand what we're heading for. And again, it may not be what we want. Just yesterday, the governor came out with the food consumption rate that people think is just outrageous. Well, it's only 2/3 of what Lummi consumes. So it's not something that we're all going to agree with, but we can agree it's better than what it was. And hopefully we can reach that kind of outcome for water and for fish and for people.
Any of the other panelists care to comment on this topic? All right, next question, please.
Hi, I want to address kind of a conjoined points that both G.I. James and Skip brought up. One thing that Skip said that I agree with is that elected politicians come and go, and no matter how honorable their intentions are, you know, they're not going to be there forever, yet everybody that lives here, all the residents, we all live here, as well as the tribes. And I understand, you know, with the tribes, the treaties are federal. I understand the fact that you guys want to deal government to government and prefer to do it at a federal level. I understand that, but how are we going to build the bridge? Because I'll tell you, as a third-generation Whatcom County resident myself, probably one of the most common things that I hear is that, well, the tribes only have something to lose. They don't have anything to gain from negotiations. And that doesn't leave me feeling warm and fuzzy. I want to know, how do we build that bridge? Because as we said, politicians come and go, so we do have to deal with one another. We do have to work. We've got to build the bridge. And it might not be possible government to government.
Skip, why don't you tackle that first, if you would, and then we'll have GI respond. And if any of the other panelists have ideas on how to continue to work together and to come with a collaborative solution to this issue, appreciate you chiming in.
I'll give you an example. The county council on Tuesday was considering a resolution to update the coordinated water systems plan, and it establishes a water utility coordinating committee, which I served on back the last time it happened in 2000. And one of the parts of that plan was that that committee was supposed to be meeting periodically. After the plan was done, we were supposed to meet periodically and sort of carry forward this thing. So I'm touching on the theme of institutional memory. And it occurred to me after the meeting, when I read a whole section of the plan that's had never been implemented, that it's kind of like putting a time capsule on the cornerstone of a building, and you don't access the time capsule until the building gets torn down. Well, you know, these plans they get generated, and then, you know, the staff people that need certain parts of them, they take those out and they use them, and then the rest of it gets put on a shelf and forgotten. So how do we put an alarm on those time capsules to send an email to the appropriate parties to let them know it's time to open the thing up and look at this thing? So we need continuous institutional memory, the adaptive management, keeping track of results. You know, those of us who have been around doing this for a while, we won't be doing it forever. So who's going to come along? Where are the records being kept? Who is the custodian of all this? How is all that going to happen? And it's a challenge, and we don't have good answer for it yet. So it's a good question. So what you need to do is keep asking it until we refine. So I don't have a good answer for you. Is how that alarm is going to go off, and who the email is going to get sent to when it does. But if we don't find some way to keep these things alive, then the vision dies. And and you know what happens after that.
Well, I can tell you I never left office willingly any of the times. I was voted out each time, and I kept coming back. So it's a difficult thing to have representative government, and you just got to stay involved. Doesn't mean that you can't be in the room. Doesn't mean that you can't be chewing on his ear. It's just that on a government-to-government basis, we can't deal with that many people. It's got to get funneled through, and we can't broker all the differences that are out there. That's got to be up to local government and state government to figure out how to funnel all of that information through. And we had a tribal member, very active elder, and she worked really hard, and which I imagine a lot of you do, and that's why some of the folks that are candidates here are here. She said, we go out and get a grassroots person that we really like and they agree with us and we work hard and we get them elected and then they get in office and you guys just screw up their mind. And, you know, the reality of the day-to-day having to pull diverse positions together is very difficult and fatal to a political career if you're honest to your value system, and that's what you got to be. That's what I was, and I read a long time ago an article that went to state school systems about tribes, and one of them was on leadership, and it said the non-tribal side would say we would negotiate with the chiefs, we'd work out a deal, and they'd go home, and their people would overturn them.
We're gonna have to roll here a little bit. We've got about we got 5 minutes left here, so we've got a couple people with questions yet, or 3 people. Okay, we're gonna have to go really quick on the questions, and panelists, let's just keep it to a sentence or 2 or 3, and let's see if we can make this happen.
All right, GI, this is kind of a indirect...
Speed forum.
Larry Helm, farmer out in South County. It's kind of an indirect question about water, but it's something I've always wondered about. The international fisheries off our territorial limit out in the ocean are just slamming the adult salmon population every season. Why aren't the Indian tribes going to the federal government and asking for a reduction in international treaty rights to reduce the take of salmon before they even get to our waters? Or are they doing that?
As far as I know, I'm losing my acronyms, and the Pacific, or the, help me, Randy, the ocean fishery, pardon? Okay, the coastal zone management, no, the group. The international, yeah, there's actually a library about this big of acronyms. But anyway, they do that, but there's only so many limits to their power that they can't, for some of this stuff to happen. It's gonna happen over time. And yeah, there's a big issue with the Japanese several mile-long gill nets out in the ocean doing that, and it was a big scream between Canada, the U.S., and the Japanese, and it's stuff that goes on all the time. But unfortunately, you know, we're not real high up on the priority list, and we get traded off for stuff. You know, it's you do this for me, we'll look the other way on this. It happens. So.
All right, next question.
Hi there, my name is Tom Fenton. GI, I've got a couple of questions. When will the Nooksack and the Lummis go down and clean all the derelict nets that are still floating in the river? There's quite a few of those. I've got some friends that float the river and they count them all the time. And then the other thing is at 6100 Lawrence Road, where it's up by Nugent's Corner, just up by Lawrence up there, where the river's etching into the farm ground up there. Whatcom County voted Tuesday night not to fund it. And I was hoping the Nooksacks and the Lummis could maybe weigh in on that, take a look at that, where they should be fixing the river dike up there on Dave Syre's old property.
On the second one, I know our fisheries director is here. I see him writing away there now. Merle Jefferson. Maybe you can talk to him about the Nugent's Corner piece after the meeting, and he can fill you in on what they know. As far as derelict nets, I'm I know, my son's on natural resources enforcement. I'll ask him to see what the hell's going on, because it's not something that we want and would like to see out there, because it's. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, we have one more person here for a question, and then we're going to wrap it up. This is going to be it. We've got a minute and a half before I need to get it turned over to Tom. So.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. My name is Marion Bedell. I've been involved in this water issue for a long time, including in my professional career as a civil engineer. My question is about flow rate, and specifying and dimensioning flow rate. In an ordinary home or business, you measure it by gallons per day or something like that. It's a chunk of water in a time period. Out in a stream, you don't have that kind of a direct measurement. So my challenge and my question is to those involved with, quote, in-stream flow that we all use, how is that in-stream flow measured and determined? And in particular reference to stream flow, I know, is cross-sectional area and velocity. That's Q is equal to area multiplied by velocity. And I'd like to get a later explanation, not tonight, of how those two dimensions of cross-sectional area, being water depth and water width, are incorporated into the, quote, in-stream flow that we hear so much about. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the panelists and the people in the audience that provided the questions. I do want to keep us on time this evening. So at this particular time, I'm going to invite Tom Loranger, the manager of Department of Ecology Water Resource Program, to the podium. Tom attended Washington State University and Western Washington University and received a BS and MS in environmental science. Tom has worked at the Department of Ecology for over 20 years. During the 1990s, he worked with innovative approaches to toxic reductions. He has been in the Water Resources Program for 10 years, and he is presently manager of that particular program. So let's welcome Tom Loranger, manager, Department of Ecology, Water Resources Program.
So Jack, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm based in Olympia, Water Resources Program for the state, and I want to call out Doug Allen. Raise your hand, Doug. He's got our Whatcom County field office. He runs, so I have the water resources for the state. He has all the different, the waste management, cleanup, spill response, water quality. So things are going well, you call me, having a problem, Doug's the man. Tom Broker, raise your hand. He's one of our lead water resource guys in our Whatcom County office. So get his card, he can help you out with water problems. So just to highlight, it's just a huge pleasure to be here. I lived here for 7 years. I worked at the university for a while. I worked at Bumblebee Seafood. I worked at Bellingham Frozen Food, Graveyard Shift, of course. And it's just, for me, it's just a treat to come back here. The work we do in water resources, we're known for water rights, we're known for a backlog of water rights, and we're known for issuing water rights. We're also known for protecting flows. We have this dual job: issue new appropriations, change water around, and then protect the resource at the same time. So it's really an interesting place to be. I wanted to give you a little context on some statewide, what's happening statewide, and then come back down to some issues in Whatcom County. And I'd start with, just the nature of this state. You just don't, I travel around and I always compare. I was born here in Western Washington, so I always compare places I go to Washington, and just nothing measures up in terms of the diversity of landscapes, the beauty. And look at WSU's agricultural research, and they'll tell you, in 2013, we had $10 billion of agricultural production in Washington State. And what you'll find is that more than half of the nation's apples are grown in Washington State from irrigated agriculture. More than half of the spearmint is grown in Washington State. 80% of the hops for beer is grown in Washington State nationwide. Most of the sweet cherries are grown in Washington State, and from here in Whatcom County, a big chunk of raspberries are also grown in Washington State. Last year, we had over $1 billion in wine sales in Washington State, so agriculture is huge, big deal in the state. I also want to call out, if you were to go Google top 20 cities, major metropolitan areas running out of water, you'll find they're in Texas and California and Florida and Arizona. They're not in Washington. In fact, if you drive down I-5, Bellingham, Everett, Seattle-Tacoma, Bellevue, Renton, Redmond, Issaquah, Longview, Vancouver, go east of the mountains, Quad Cities, Spokane, big water rights in play. So one of the characteristics of Washington State is big metropolitan areas, well hydrated with healthy water rights. That's a little context. And something about our stream flow statutes, really interesting. Our first statute the legislature gave us was from 1949 that directed us, the first statute that directed us to protect the fishery was from 1949. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find another state that has that. And what they told us to do was, before we issue water rights, in this case it was the old Water Resources Division from 1949, before any water rights are issued, you need to consult with the old Fish and Game Department and ensure that the diversion is not going to create problems for the fishery. 1949. It's the guys over at Fish and Wildlife speculate 1947 was the first year that the Walla Walla River went dry from diversions for agriculture, and that we've speculated that it might have been consequent to the extirpation of salmon species in the Walla Walla that we got that statute. So Washington is one in the top 5 states for fisheries. I don't know that I understand or trust the economics behind how you value a sport fishery, a tribal fishery, and a commercial fishery, but clearly we're up there with Alaska, California, Florida, and Massachusetts in terms of the significance value of the fishery in this state. So another context, what sometimes we take for granted, and I saw a weather projection, it's not going to rain here in Whatcom County for another 4 or 5 weeks, looks like, from projection. So we have this, we're on the northern edge of a Mediterranean climate, and so we have this pronounced dry period. And if you superimpose water demand, annual water demand and water use over stream flows and precipitation, they're exactly opposite. So I like to say around most of the state, on an annualized basis, there's a lot of water. In fact, there's plenty of water. It's that key period, late summer, early fall, where there's a lot of competition for a scarce resource. Another note I want to make is climate change. So we get data from the University of Washington's Climate Center. They have some of the best, the climate change group is some of the best folks in the country. They're predicting that we'll have a decrease of 27% in the snowpack in the Cascades and Olympics by the 2020s, and then 35% by the 2040s. I know every 5 years these projections change, but we just keep them, watch them, and I think that the smart people working with this are projecting less snowpack. So what that means for us and for our water planning is that we'll have reservoirs that fill slower, take longer to fill, less runoff, and we'll probably have lower flows in the late summer as well from less total water available. So one of the questions I want to raise is, so what's the state doing in response to maybe less water available for the future? The biggest thing is this Columbia River initiative, where money was appropriated, $200 million back in 2006, to come up with new water supplies. And since 2006, through our Office of Columbia River, we've generated another 376,000 acre-feet of water by remanaging the reservoirs on the Columbia River. So where you have reservoirs, you can operate them differently for more total production. And the way they divided it up in the law was that a third of the generated new water would go for improved flow for the fish, and 2/3 would go for out-of-stream use for agriculture and municipal supply. So that's probably the biggest initiative right now for facing climate change. The other big one from the last 2 years is this Yakima Basin integrated strategy. And in that case, all the stakeholders got together in Yakima, including the Yakima tribe, the feds, the county, and other water-interested parties, and came up with a plan to increase storage, improve habitat for fish, so to increase flows, habitat for both fish and both out-of-stream use for expanded irrigation. Big, long project, a lot of work, a lot of consensus building work, but that's a model. Following that, the legislature appropriated $32 million of seed money in 2013, and now they're looking for some federal matches to get that on the ground. Right now, as of this year, the Menashtash Creek project has already come online, and they estimate there's 1,300 additional acre feet of water for fish habitat without any impairment of delivery for ag uses, and that's just through more efficient irrigation systems. So those are some examples. The other thing I'd point out for facing climate change is drought response. You know, particularly on the east side, we've got some drought response programs where when water's not available, you go to backup wells, or you send out a notice and people on domestic use or municipal systems go to indoor use. And so to me, it looks like, you know, now we do that every, 6 years? Well, that's going to change, and it's going to start being every other year as, you know, climate change progresses. So that's just something that we will see. The other thing in terms of the water future and what to do with respect to less water and more demands in the future is the idea of water markets and water banking. And so in the Yakima Basin, invested a whole bunch of money in private water banks where people can come and exchange and get water. And in the case of the Yakima, you need to have mitigation water for your new exempt well. So you put a new exempt well in, calculate the impacts on surface waters, and you purchase mitigation water through the whole basin. So the Yakima is a good example of where a water bank or exchange is in place. So you as a home builder, for example, don't have to go out and try to find a water right. You can just go to an exchange and purchase a credit. We have one of those in operation in the Dungeness too. Dungeness is much smaller scale, but we have a contractor, Washington Water Trust, operating an exchange in the Dungeness, and so people putting in new wells, just instead of trying to find water, because it's a closed basin, no more water available, they pay a fee. I think in the Dungeness it's like $1,500 for some simple basic use, one-time payment, and then you have it for your new well for well into the future. So those are a couple examples of what the world is looking like. And I wanted to call out, a very big deal. We also actually have just hired, with some funds from the legislature, a contractor to develop a water exchange in the Skagit, based on, I want to talk a little bit about what happened in the Skagit. And, it was this Swinomish decision back in October 2013. The Supreme Court weighed in on a rule we did there. And it was a flow rule that protected flows back in 2001. And then we didn't address exempt wells and how you could put new exempt wells in when flows weren't being met. So we were sued by Skagit County, and we settled and put in these reserves of water. And typically when we go, as I said, we have this dual mission to allocate water and protect flows. And typically how we do that is we use these habitat assessment models and decide how this is the flow needed for fish. And then we use a tool called overriding consideration for public interest and say, well, even though this is what is required for fish, we do need to have water for future out-of-stream use. So we use this tool called overriding consideration of public interest, and we establish flows, and then we allocate water for out-of-stream use. And the Supreme Court weighed in and gave us some good feedback on that, and they said, well, number one, you can't do that. You can't do that when a flow is already set. You're reappropriating water that's already been appropriated for flows. What don't you get about first in time, first in right? So that was one thing we heard. The other thing was an overriding consideration of public interest. Well, you had those reserves we created in the Skagit were pretty big. They covered a lot of different kind of uses, municipal uses, some industrial uses, some irrigation uses. And there's questions raised about, well, does a private well, is that really a public interest? Is a private use really a public interest? So that happened in the fall, and so now we're working on what we call rural water solutions to figure out, do we have some other tools to use to make this work better? And in the meantime, it's had a very bad effect on the Skagit. It's one of our really difficult places in the state. We get calls from people that right now they've got properties, they can't get a building permit, they've got investments, they had plans for their kids to, build right next to them, they had retirement plans, they can't get a loan from the bank. It's a very bad situation, and it's something we're trying to solve. And one of the big challenges of the Skagit is, unlike the Dungeness and unlike the Yakima, is that not a big tradition of working together. A lot of lawsuits and differences of opinion, but not a lot of collaboration on how to find solutions. So it would be found to be a very challenging environment to work in. So anyway, we're working with we have this so-called Water Resources Advisory Committee, and we're running options by, should we change the statute so that it's clear that we can use overriding consideration of public interest for reserving waters and protecting flows, or can we use under the existing statutes? Is there another way to split that in-stream, out-of-stream? So we're having great discussions on that, and probably won't go into that here in too much detail. Then maybe just bringing it back down to Whatcom County. So Skagit rule in place, didn't address exempt wells, so we added reserves. So the Nooksack has a flow rule tool too, but the Nooksack flow rule is from 1985, and that's before less was known about the connection between groundwater and surface water. So there's a couple different ideas about how that Nooksack rule should be interpreted. There was a case, I call it, so I have four things here on Whatcom County. Number one is the Hearst decision. So here's where you all are getting statewide interest. June 2013, it was this Hearst and other people, as well as a group called FutureWise. They appealed the decision, the comprehensive plan for Thurston County, to the Western Washington Growth Hearings Board, and they said the plan did not adequately protect water availability and water quality. So I'm on the availability side, and so their point is, look, in the Skagit, you need to mitigate for all new wells, but all these new exempt wells are going in the Nooksack, and flows aren't being met. How can this be? And so right now, the board ruled in their favor. Yes, how could this be? That's what the Growth Management Hearings Board is saying. And it's been appealed, and we're skipping the Superior Court. It's going straight to the Court of Appeals. And it's between the county and FutureWise. We've been involved in settlement negotiations. They've sort of fallen off, weren't successful. So we at the department we're planning to have an amicus brief. That's a friend of the court. So these two parties are arguing, and then we'll weigh in on what we think it means, what we think this old 1985 rule means. So that's one Whatcom County issue. Second one issue out there is in 2011, the Lummi and Nooksack tribes petitioned the federal government to adjudicate their water right. And so that is a really interesting question. I don't know. I've actually tried to get some answers, and it's hard to crack through the feds and who's got it, how long it's going to take, what's going to happen. I don't have a good sense at all of the time frame. But when the feds have weighed in other places, it's been a very big deal. So I just wish I don't really know what to expect in terms of timeline. I know from the Klamath River, it was a very difficult situation, I know, down in Oregon. There was a series of agreements, and as of this year, the tribes and irrigators and federal government have agreed to increasing flows by 30,000 acre-feet of water. And there's agreement in place that in water short years, the tribes and irrigators will share. And also there will be pretty significant investments made for economic development for the tribe and also for habitat restoration in the Klamath. So I don't know, sometimes it seems like it does take that sort of trigger point to bring parties together to solve problems. And the feds have a very big hammer. So that's the second big issue, is what's going to happen with that. Third issue is, I was going to say the Berry bill. It's been in legislature 2 years that I know. In fact, I testified on it last year, and I testified in support of it. And that was, there's some berry growers in in Whatcom County that changed, and so we had a so-called spreading. You know, when you get a water right, here's the place of use, and you're limited to it. But back in the 90s, there was a lot of transition from pasture to berry growing, and in response to that, the legislature passed a law that said you can spread. That is, you can go beyond your place of use so long as you don't exceed your annual consumptive quantity. So if you're using less water, so you're not using any more water in terms of it actually being evapotranspired and leaving the system and leaving the groundwater and surface water, that's okay. That's the effect of the environment. Don't increase that annual consumptive quantity, and you can spread. So the problem is that it references the last 5 years. And so the spreading bill was passed. We at Ecology, our budget was cut. We lost a big chunk of our staff. We didn't do the changes. And so now we'd like to do them. We have a few more staff, but when you look at annual consumptive quantity, the law says you look at the last 5 years. Well, the last 5 years they were in berry production. So it's a very simple change, just allowing us to look back. And it would take care of provide valid water rights to about 20 berry growers. Did not pass the legislative session. And just to point out, as some of our folks that have worked in water a long time, you know, they just say water is hard. There's some pretty staked out positions, and it's often hard to make progress on it. So that's the third issue where Whatcom County comes up a lot. And then the fourth issue I'll call out, and that is water rights. We hear about the Nooksack in particular around the state about, well, we understand that there's a pretty significant number of agricultural uses without any apparent water rights or claims. How can that be? And it's fairly well known around the state. And the question is, well, Ecology, why should we be compliant with the laws when you guys haven't done anything in the Nooksack? And then you get into kind of a complicated story. So I think, you know, I just wanted to call it out that it is well known. It's a big problem, and we'd like to, you know, keep working with folks up here on it. And I don't have and here's the answer, but it's out there. And darn, that wasn't a very happy note. I didn't want to close on that. Well, I'm out of time. Can we leave now? So that's it. That's my time. I appreciate it.
Tom, thank you so much for giving us an overview of what's happening in the state and some of the issues that we have to find a resolution to in Whatcom County. Again, and I'd like to thank the rest of the panel members also, GI, Ed, Dave, and Skip, for your participation tonight. Once again, would like to thank the Grange for facilitating these 4 forums that have happened in the last few months. Let's give them another round of applause. And for the Lummi Nation for hosting the event in this beautiful convention center that they have here. I encourage each and every one of you to stay involved in whatever capacity that you can in these issues as we move forward through the next months and years. It is, you know, my thing is when you have something complicated is you break it down into sections and you start. You have to take a step forward, and I'm hopeful that and I'm pleased that the Whatcom County Council is supportive of reconstituting a fair amount of this work. We're going to try to do it in a manner that is appropriate, thought out, planned, cost-effective, and hopefully at the end of the day is we don't make what we call in the industry more shelf art. What we make is we take and put feet and equipment and under these plans and actually turn them into action items. So I wish you all the best. Drive safely on your way home. Have a good evening.